Welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast, your go-to source for everything happening in the town of Bedford's local government. Whether it's new initiatives or important decisions shaping our town's future, you'll hear it right here. Brought to you by Grove Street FM and hosted by Town Manager Bart Warner. This podcast is dedicated to keeping our residents informed and engaged.
Good Wednesday morning, everybody. It is March 13th, 2024. My name is Bart Warner. I am the town manager of Bedford and the host of this podcast, which is Best Little Town, focusing primarily on the activities of your town government, and in particular, an in-depth recap of the town council meeting, which we had one just last night, Tuesday, March 12th, and it was longer than usual. So given that, I'm going to jump into providing a bit of a recap. To begin with, as part of the agenda, I did give an update to council last night regarding the Bedford Middle School project, which is that I spoke with the current property owner, Dave McCormick, yesterday. Sorry, that would have actually been Monday. As part of our previous discussion with Dave, our police department conducted an independent security assessment of the property over the weekend, and we passed that information along to Dave via email. I also reported that the proposed fiscal year 24-25 budget will be presented at the next council meeting, which takes place March 26th at 7 o'clock p.m. The budget proposal has been developed by staff with some input from the Town Council Finance Committee. We will present the basic numbers associated with that on the 26th. Council can then schedule some work sessions at their discretion to review the document. Ultimately, we expect to have our work plan for the next fiscal year, which begins on July 1st, adopted at the May 28th meeting. Getting into the rest of the council agenda, last night we had a couple of people appear before council. One citizen spoke to concerns they have about labels on police cars. And we were also joined last night by School Superintendent Mark Bergen and Deputy Superintendent Karen Woodford, who had volunteered to come and speak to council about the school board's plans for facilities use, attendance, and some of their own budget concerns and plans, some of which may have an impact upon the town and certainly its residents. Dr. Bergen and Dr. Woodford both presented some really useful information about enrollment and budget issues that challenge their operations and provided some background about the proposals to deal with that. Of particular interest, I think, to town residents was one of four options that relate to operations and facilities, and it's actually option 4, which would conceivably or theoretically involve a change of use to the Bedford Primary School. But as Dr. Bergen and Dr. Woodford both explained, their role in this was to generate some options for consideration by the school board, and of the four options listed, they're kind of sequential in terms of preference, I think it's fair to say. So option 1 would be the most likely to occur. If that does not happen, then the alternative would be option 2, and so on and so forth through option 4. So there's a lot of questions about the impact on Bedford Primary School. The town's zoning comes into play there because we do regulate the usage of the property. Right now, it was reported this week in the Bedford Bulletin, but I haven't had a chance to see the story. That zoning issue may or may not be a factor. The way our zoning process works is that if somebody is proposing something new, a change of use or a new building, then they make an application, and at that point we assess what the ordinance says and how it addresses that issue. That hasn't taken place yet, and depending on the route the school board takes, it may not be an issue. So just wanted to be perfectly clear in case there's any questions about the town's involvement with the Bedford Primary School, that that's the nature of it. After the presentation given by Dr. Bergen and Dr. Woodford, council had several questions and comments. I'm not going to attempt to recap all of those on this podcast, but I will encourage you to watch the meeting. It's posted on our YouTube channel. If you can't watch it during live stream, we always have those up in short order afterwards. That conversation actually lasted about an hour. A lot of good information back and forth. And just want to say again, we appreciate our colleagues, Dr. Bergen and Dr. Woodford, for taking their time to present information. Beyond that, there were a few councilmen who offered some insights and comments of interest. Councilman Darrell Updike recognized Liberty High School student Marissa Parikh, who recently won a state civics competition sponsored by the American Legion and who moves on to the national contest. And in addition to being proud of our young citizens at Liberty and Marissa in particular, it was noted that this is the first time some student from our area has advanced to this national level of competition since World War II. So it's a pretty significant accomplishment in its own right, and we wish Marissa all the best at the national competition. Vice Mayor C.G. Stanley noted that he participated in a meeting dealing with a community development block grant project in the Hilltop neighborhood, which is over near South Street and King Street in that area between Centertown and Susie Gibson School. The town is wrapping up the first phase of a project where we are rehabilitating and providing assistance to homeowners for some houses that need some attention and probably are suffering from a lack of resources. The first phase is wrapping up. We have fixed up about 11 homes as part of that. Phase 2 is getting ready to kick off. We've received another grant to do that, which would address another 11 homes in that neighborhood. CG and Bob Carson are both members of the management team for that project, along with our Housing and Redevelopment Authority. And C.G. Stanley noted last night that he was pleased with the results of Phase 1 and looks forward to continuing to support the work in Phase 2, and we certainly appreciate his support. Bruce Johansson offered an interesting insight into one of the monuments in front of the Bedford Courthouse. We have several historical monuments there commemorating participation of our citizens over the years in significant historical events. The one in particular that Bruce Johansson mentioned last night is the monument to the Battle of Point Pleasant, which took place 250 years ago this year. In fact, the anniversary of that event will be October 10th. Bruce pointed out that looking at the names of some of the people who participated in that battle 250 years ago, there are still several surnames that are recognizable in our community today, and he shared the rather astute observation that history is all around us here in Bedford, and it's good to take note and appreciate that. In the report of council committees, Bob Carson, who is the chair of the property committee, noted that that group met yesterday prior to the council meeting. They discussed some plans for the property that the town is acquiring from the school board on Edmond Street. That would be the property currently known as the Edmond Street Park, but once that transfer is complete, council has plans to rename that park and to also recognize its heritage and identity as the Ball Diamond in a formal way. We also talked about a graveyard the town owns on Odie Street in the vicinity of Talbot Street. A lot of people don't know the town operates several cemetery facilities. The most notable are probably Fairmont on East Main Street, and then the Oakwood Greenwood complex along Longwood Avenue. But in addition to those, there are several other smaller facilities that we maintain, including this one on Odie Street, which has graves dating back to the 1700s. And we're talking about the need to make sure we properly assess that and make sure that we are fully aware of the location of all those graves, with an eye towards maybe doing some improvements and beautification if we're able to do so. The property committee also discussed its facilities use policy for use of town-owned spaces. The town has several spaces available for use by civic groups on an ongoing basis. Those are typically free when we can accommodate those without any formal scheduling, but we also have several that people can reserve for a fee. We did get a request from a group that's been using the council chambers on an irregular basis in the past, but who have communicated that they intend to do that on a monthly basis. So ordinarily that would trigger a $50 fee for use of the council chamber on a monthly basis, but the property committee talked about maybe amending the policy a little bit to work with that group to see if we can offset their costs and be a little bit more user-friendly. I will say that the group in question is the Bedford Republican Party, which, again, have been having their meetings in the council chambers, not on a regular basis in the past, but they are proposing to use it on a monthly basis moving forward. And so the property committee did recommend that maybe we relook at our policy and the way we apply it for them in a user-friendly manner. Also, Mayor Black reported on a meeting that he and Vice Mayor Stanley attended with their counterparts on the Bedford County Board of Supervisors, that being Edgar Tuck and Tammy Parker. That meeting took place last Monday, March 4th, and we talked about several operational issues and possibilities for collaboration with the County Board of Supervisors. There were some services on which there was not a level of agreement that was reached, but there were others in which there was some indication that we can collaborate together. One of those projects is the proposed passenger rail station for the Amtrak service. And as I say that, there's the train horn in the distance, which is just perfect. Didn't plan that, folks, but we hope you enjoy that serendipitous moment as we let the train pass. So the status of the passenger rail proposal in Bedford is that Bedford is included in Amtrak's plans for a future stop. Apparently evaluating all the standards and metrics associated with their business model says that it makes sense for them to stop here and let people get on Amtrak. That requires some additional planning and engineering work, which is going to be covered by a federal grant that involves a local match. That local match is $4.6 million, which is a pretty fair chunk of change for anybody. But Bedford County and the town of Bedford are talking about cooperating in that cost. The other good news about that is we don't have to come up with it right away. We're thinking that the earliest that money would be needed would be 2027. And once that work is completed, then we can clear another hurdle towards passenger rail service in Bedford. We continue to be optimistic about the ultimate outcome of that. We just don't know when it's going to happen. Mayor Black also provided information about a community meeting he held the week prior to that, dealing with parking issues, primarily in Centertown, but to get some feedback from business owners and concerned citizens. And again, the more precise details of that report can be viewed online on our YouTube site by watching the meeting. And this is a good opportunity for me to say we encourage people to come join us on the second and fourth Tuesdays at 7 o'clock in person. But if you can't make it in person, we do sponsor a live streaming option through our partner Media Squatch, who we appreciate very much. Getting into the rest of the council agenda, we had the report of council committees, and at that meeting, Councilman Carson reported on what the property committee had discussed. Council decided to take up the recommendation for a possible amendment of their facility use fee at a future meeting, and we will probably have that featured on the March 26th agenda. We did hold a public hearing related to budget amendments for several grant opportunities that the town has had to act on, which were later in the agenda, and we will speak to those momentarily. There were no participants who spoke during the public hearing notice, and so we moved on to other matters. In our consent agenda, Jason Horn and Francis Coles were both reappointed to the Planning Commission for terms to expire in 2028. And James Rose and Jody Mayhew were reappointed to the Local Board of Building Code Appeals with their terms to expire in 2026. We then moved on to an item of old business, which was consideration of the revised zoning ordinance. That is a project that the Planning Commission has been working on since 2019. A consultant was engaged, and they produced a document that we feel like is going to be a little more user-friendly than the previous ordinance, which had been in place in its present format since the 1980s. Council had taken this up previously and had tabled the matter back in January based on concerns about a few particular topics, one of which was dealing with homestays or short-term rentals, one of which dealt with a setback issue in an existing neighborhood, and then another dealt with digital sign regulations. Ultimately, council did decide to go ahead and proceed with adopting the ordinance as presented, but they did note that those three matters need to be explored a little bit further, and that's something that can happen at any time through the formal amendment process. And I think the council and the Planning Commission will have future discussions about possible resolution of those outlying issues. But in the mayor's comments, they indicated that probably need to go ahead with the rest of the bulk of the ordinance, which is an important thing to get in place overall and which probably should not have been delayed further. So council did vote with 6 members in favor of going ahead and adopting the zoning ordinance. Councilman Updike cast the dissenting vote, noting his concern about the fact that those other issues had not been addressed. Our new business last night considered primarily of approving a slew of grant projects that were related to the public hearing that I mentioned. I'll begin with the first one, which is a $10,000 grant from the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality for litter prevention and recycling programs. This is something we use primarily to fund the Keep Bedford Beautiful Commission and their efforts in litter pickup and participation in things like our town cleanup, which occurs in fall and spring of each year. I'll also give a little mention right now that our spring cleanup will be coming up in the middle of April. We will announce the formal date here shortly. One thing we encourage people to do is try to respect the schedule there as much as possible. Again, the date will not occur until the middle of April, so we would appreciate if people didn't put a lot of things out by the curb prior to that. The other thing during the event itself is that while that's a week-long event for our staff, it is geared towards your typical collection date for your regular trash service. So if your date falls on a Monday, please have your particular things out on the Monday of cleanup week and on the corresponding days as well. And just as a reminder, this is a service we provide to those citizens and customers who do pay the monthly fee for refuse collection. If you have opted out of the refuse service, this is part of that, so you will not be receiving that service. And we understand if there may be questions about that, but we just want to get the information out ahead of time. That grant receipt was approved by council unanimously. The next item dealt with a grant from the Department of Criminal Justice Services, which provides funding for police related to training and equipment. I'm going to let the train go by while I continue to speak here. This is a $5,000 grant that the town received. The police department intends to use the funds for updating its expired trauma kits. Town council voted unanimously to accept that grant, and it will be included in the current year budget. The next item of new business related to a grant from the Federal Emergency Management Agency for $4,840,000 to provide 2 generators for the Centra Bedford Memorial Hospital. This is designed to increase the reliability of power for the hospital. Obviously, that's a use that you don't want to be subject to power outages, which are infrequent, but they do happen. These generators will provide more assurance and more continuity of service there, so it's no longer as much of a concern. The town is the applicant for that because we are the only ones eligible to receive that money, but it's ultimately a pass-through. The town will receive the $4.8 million and disperse that back towards Central Medical Group. Council unanimously voted to accept that grant as well. The next grant that was considered was an American Rescue Plan Act grant of $157,000 for the police department. This was earmarked for criminal justice services. The town will receive $157,000, and the police department intends to use that primarily for laptops, ballistic helmets, rifles, and technology solutions. Council unanimously approved receipt of that grant as well. The next grant is one from the Department of Motor Vehicles related to alcohol enforcement activities, primarily for enforcement and training for police officers. That grant is for $8,000, and council unanimously voted to accept that and amend the budget appropriately. DMV also provided an $11,000 grant for selective enforcement training for police traffic services, and town council unanimously voted to accept that. The next item of new business related to an ordinance related to campaign finance reporting. This is a matter where the state regulates information related to elections, primarily identifying funding for candidates, campaign committees, and political action committees. The state regulates these things for expenditures in excess of $25,000, but the state code says that towns can regulate themselves beyond that. The town attorney drafted an ordinance for the council's review. Council indicated that they are interested in applying that level of regulation to themselves in the town election process, and authorized staff to go ahead and place the formal ordinance on a future agenda for consideration and adoption. We concluded the regular meeting agenda last night with a presentation from Mary Zirkle, who is our Director of Community Development, and Gary McIver, who is our building official, who provided a report on basically the manner in which they go about their jobs in economic development, planning and zoning, building inspections, and code enforcement. Again, I would encourage people to watch the YouTube video recap of the meeting, which is available online. Good information as to how we attract businesses and try to retain business in town. And then also kind of the day-to-day applications of zoning and how it relates to town residents and businesses. Mr. McIver also provided some very good insight into the manner in which he does his job, which is primarily code enforcement. One thing that I gleaned from Gary's presentation is that I would like the public to be aware of is that most of the applicable building codes and the code enforcement rules that apply to properties are very procedural and very much bound by process. And so the focus of all of these regulations, which are in fact very minimal, are to ensure health and safety. Again, I'm going to go back to my use of the term minimal. If there is an issue with the building, typically what Gary is charged with is making sure that there are no negative physical impacts of that on anybody else. So rather than actually rebuilding buildings that are damaged or demolished, his task is to make sure that the site is secure in a way that it does not create a hazard to persons or health. Also, with regard to code enforcement, I want to make clear to people that if there are issues that you're having in your neighborhood, or particularly with a neighbor, you have to understand that the code enforcement staff's task is to make sure they respect the rights of all parties involved. So we do have occasions where people may have complaints about things such as noise, or things that their neighbors may be doing that they are concerned about. What we will pass along is that the best course of action, if you have a good relationship with your neighbor, is to talk about that with them directly before you contact code enforcement. But even then, be aware that while we will investigate the issue to ascertain whether or not there is a violation that takes place, we also have to provide a process that respects the rights of the people who may be in violation of the ordinance. So I guess my point in sharing all this is there may be some view that the town can do things to resolve some disputes between citizens that, frankly, we do not have the power to do. And while we hope everyone gets along well with each other, I guess the advice I would give people is that if there is a matter that concerns you related to your property and the town enforcement officials cannot provide the result you want, you probably will need to consult private legal counsel to pursue the matter. Again, that relates to kind of our duties overall as the local government. Frequently, the criticism we get is that we overreach and overstep into people's private lives and concerns where we shouldn't. But then we also receive a lot of criticism that we don't do enough and we should be able to do more than we can. So this is the life we've chosen. We appreciate that and we work hard at it, but do understand that that's the balancing act that most public officials have to face in an appointed role. Again, I appreciate your time and attention to this recap of the town council meeting. We appreciate your choice in living here and working here, and we hope that we continue to provide good services that meet your expectations. I can be contacted directly at any time by email at bwarner@bedfordva.gov or via telephone. Our main number is 540-587-6001. And we will continue to do our best and strive hard to maintain or attain or pursue our status as the world's best little town, and we hope that you will continue to enjoy the time you spend here. Till we're together next time, thanks, and we look forward to seeing you and serving you.